how does somebody like you who's had no connection to Bollywood come to Bombay and figure it all out?
Every day I would come back from college and somehow some days have a meltdown being like, what have I done? Why have I come to Bombay? And that's how my journey began.
Now let's come back to Lush Stories. How did that happen, right?
I got Anurag first and so on and so forth. I got Dibakar, Zoya, and then eventually Karan.
I'm one of those people who, till this conversation, thought that producers basically mean bring in the money.
So producing is a very thankless job and it's not for the faint-hearted because every day there is a new problem. You are chasing good stories. Now sometimes those stories may involve trying to get a Shah Rukh Khan and a 300 crore budget. So nobody comes to the industry and says, मैं तो सिर्फ छोटी फिल्में ही बनाऊंगा. Till 9 months ago or 8 months ago, everybody was like, nobody wants to see Hindi films. Before that, everybody only wants to see OTT. Then came a phase, people only want to see the South films. Now people are going back to theaters to watch Sunny Deol. So you don't know the trend. Nobody knows anything. You ask people, तो आप weekend पे what do you guys do? People are like, mall जाते हैं, picture देखने जाते हैं. That's it.
Hello and welcome to the Indian Dream Podcast. I'm your host Siddharth, and on this podcast, we talk to entrepreneurs who've built large, successful businesses. We talk about how they scaled up and all the challenges they faced along the way with a very simple goal of learning what it takes to build a large, profitable business. With that, today's episode is with an Emmy nominated producer of Lush Stories 2, Bombay Talkies, and many other movies. She's none other than Ashi Dua, and she has a fascinating story to tell. Before we get into her story, if you're like me, you probably thought a producer is someone who puts in the money. They're responsible for financing the project. What I realized after talking to Ashi was that's not true. Yes, one part of the role of a producer, and there are multiple producers who put in a large chunk of money, but there are producers who don't actually put in money, but they're responsible for putting the entire project together. Right from getting a director for a script, right from finding the actors, and all the day-to-day operations that are required to actually make a movie, even post-production and marketing of that movie. All of that sits on the responsibility of a producer. Think of them as a single point of contact for everything that's needed to make a movie. And that's exactly what Ashi did. What makes her story fascinating is she doesn't come from a Bollywood background. She was born in Bareilly, grew up in Nainital, and landed up in Bombay with no connections to the film industry. From there, she met Anurag Kashyap, who helped her understand what it takes to make movies. And that's how her production house Flying Unicorn started almost a decade back. She started out with producing Bombay Talkies, and since then has followed with hits like Lush Stories 2, Ghost Stories, and many other films. I talked to her about the business of movie making, what a producer does, the kind of challenges they face on a day-to-day basis, and also an important question on if somebody wants to crack and make it big in the Bollywood industry, apart from being an actor, which is a different ball game altogether, what does it take to actually build a career in Bollywood? Before we get into the episode, don't forget to subscribe and comment to tell us what kind of industries or founders you want me to cover on the episodes, and make sure to drop us a rating on Spotify, Apple, or whichever platform you're listening to this on. With that, let's jump into the conversation with Ashi. Ashi, welcome to the Indian Dream Podcast. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. You've had a fascinating journey, a fascinating story of coming from Bareilly and making it big in the Bollywood industry. You have produced films like Lush Stories 2, Bombay Talkies. I would love to understand how does somebody like you who's had no connection to Bollywood come to Bombay and figure it all out. So let's start there, right? What made you move from Bareilly to Bombay, and then we'll go from there.
So thank you for having me. I'm excited about this conversation. I was born in Bareilly. My family lives there. But I grew up in a place called Nainital in a boarding school. And right after school, I went to Delhi for college. And I was studying in Delhi. And towards the end of my college and through my 3 years in college, every summer I kept interning with different media houses because I wanted to, I mean, I knew I wanted to do something with media, but I wasn't sure what that is. What was it? Journalism? Was it events? Was it writing? I wasn't sure. So I went through all of that. I worked with NDTV. I worked with a magazine publishing house. I worked with an event company. I tried everything. And towards the end of my college, I remember, I mean, it's a really funny story. I've spoken about it before. There was this airline being launched, Air Deccan, which I'm sure you would have heard of. And there were hoardings all over Delhi saying a flight from Delhi to Mumbai for 500 rupees. So, and they had just plastered it everywhere. So I remember I was just about finishing my exams and I was like, I need to go somewhere else. And as much as I had a great time in Delhi, I never felt like it was my city at that point. And the strange calling from Bombay, and I took that flight. I was like, what have I got to lose? 500 rupees. I'm just going to go. And I went, I got into Bombay, and I mean, we come from the north, and you can't just move anywhere. You have to tell your parents something. So I was like, what am I going to do? My dad was like, why are you going to Bombay? So I said, I'm going to enroll myself into a course, which I did in St. Xavier's to study for a year. So I thought I'll do this course and I'll figure out what Bombay is like. And I took up this course. I was doing this the first few months in Bombay. For anybody who moves to Bombay in the beginning, it's not that great. Like Bombay can be very overwhelming. There's just a lot of people. Everybody's in a rush. It's a lot. So I remember traveling in these local trains every day, and every day I would come back from college and somehow some days have a meltdown, being like, what have I done? Why have I come to Bombay? Because in that sense, Delhi is more peaceful, slightly slower, you know. So Bombay, nobody really cares about the other person. They don't really interfere in that sense. They're not going to be like, like what Delhi people try and talk to you. So it was very tough in the first few months, but there's something about the city that just, like, with all its exterior toughness, there's something about the city that gets you. And once you've passed those 5 6 months, it it kind of has you. It has your heart. And that was it. And I kind of started feeling like, okay, this is the place I want to be, because Bombay as a girl, and at least in 2005, makes you feel really liberated, because nobody is really looking at you. You feel very safe in the city, and all of those things were there. So I felt very good coming from UP and Delhi, living in Bombay, very safe. And I started enjoying the pace of the city. And yeah, my course got over, and I took up this internship at Percept. And that's where I met, you know people like us who don't come from the industry. Nobody moves to Bombay to be like, I'm going to become a producer. You have people coming to be actors and singers, or people enroll themselves into like technical courses like editing and all of that to learn that. And then, but nobody comes here to become a producer, because the mindset always is that, oh, producers are people who put in money. I mean, you've got to have money to be able to make these films. So when I started working in Percept, I had the great privilege to meet Mr. Anurag Kashyap then. And he was making a film for Percept, and that's where I met him the first time. And because I'd heard so much about all these films he had made, which had not been able to release, like Black Friday, and there was a film called Paanch, which he had made but hadn't released. So we started like jamming in these writing workshops he was giving everyone. And I started understanding how movies get made, and how the studios were just coming into India. There was Disney coming in, there was Fox coming in, and all these studios were coming in. So through Anurag is where I understood that in Hollywood, producers are actually people who put in projects together, not necessarily people who put in the money. The studios are the ones putting in the money. So, and then that's when he told me, listen, I'm making this film. Would you like to read it? And he gave me the script of this movie called Devdi. And I read it, and I instantly fell in love. And I was like, that's amazing that in Bollywood, in Hindi cinema, we are making movies like this. He said, would you like to come and work on it? Would you like to produce it? And I was like, I don't know anything about producing. He said, you're going to learn on the job. And then I just got onto it, and I worked, and I started meeting a lot of people and started understanding what producing entails. And during that time, there was, Indian cinema was completing 100 years of cinema, of the first film that ever got made. And I would watch all these anthologies like Paris Je t'aime, New York I Love You, um, Four Rooms, and all these anthologies which brings together a lot of talented filmmakers. And I told Anurag, why don't we do a film celebrating 100 years of Indian cinema with four directors? And he was like, sure, like, I'll direct it, but how are you going to get the other three directors? And that's how my journey began. I got Anurag first, and so on and so forth. I got Dibakar, Zoya, and then eventually Karan. And then I was able to raise money from Viacom Studios for Bombay Talkies. And that's how my first movie came into place.
That's a fascinating story. So Devdi is where you were assisting him, just helping him out.
Is where I got into production to understand how it really works. And he was more confident of me than I was of myself, because he said, I feel like you have you have the skill to be a good producer. And that's what you need like one person to be able to be that encouraging and have that faith in you, so that you can in turn have faith in yourself to
Yeah.
be able to do what you want to do. And I think that's where it began for me. So I of course owe a lot to Anurag in every way. And like me, there were many people he's inspired and gotten into films, whether they're directors, music directors. I remember Amit Trivedi. It was for his first album, Devdi. And there were so many ads back then who are now really big film directors, like Vasan Bala. And there were so many of them who worked with Anurag during Devdi. So I've seen everybody's journey from then to now, and it's been very fascinating.
I can imagine, and I think Anurag is known to do that in the industry for actors, directors,
Yeah,
musicians.
because
Um,
Anurag has this eye for people. And the other thing about Anurag is he's not stuck with trying to push people who are already part of the industry.
yeah,
He actually looks for talent, whether it's with actors like Nawazuddin or like directors, music, producers, technicians. He's pushed a lot of people in the industry who've come from nowhere.
yeah.
So for him, it's all about skill and talent. So if he sees that, he's there to push you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of his interviews and I've read a lot about him. His style of making a film is also very chaotic and unique in a sense. So it probably helps not having anyone with past ideas on how a film is directed or how a film is produced, because you're coming with a fresh slate.
With Anurag, somehow the team that he has around him understands him so well that even though it is chaos, like if it was any other team or teams that are used to working in a different way, it would be complete chaos. But with Anurag, it just becomes organized chaos, if you know what I mean. It's like people around him understand him so well. So, for example, I was, Love Stories of One, when we were producing it, till a few days ago, we were like chasing him and we were like, what's going on? The dialogues are not ready. This is not done. That is not done. And he was so calm through all of it. And I was seriously panicking. And his team, which had done many films with him, kept telling me, don't worry, we'll figure it out. Because on the other hand, there were other directors that I was working with, like Debakar and Zoya, who are so meticulously planned, like their prep is on point, and like they are so prepared when they come on set. So I was very scared, how's this going to go? But with Anurag, he just comes on set, and somehow his team and him are so in sync with each other, it just falls in place beautifully. Also, he is very spontaneous and he improvises a lot on set. So a lot of it, you may have read something on a script, but when he's shooting, you're not going to have that scene,
Yeah,
because that's how he is, that's how he rolls.
yeah,
And through my process of this, working with different directors, it was literally like going to different film schools. I realized that everybody has their own style and way of working, and somehow it works beautifully for everyone. Like a Debakar is so proper with his prep. Like he preps so hard that you feel like you'll just be on set and it'll just smoothly move. And with Anurag, there's not going to be enough prep, but when you're on set, it'll somehow flow. So every director really knows their rhythm and how it moves for them, and it just works beautifully. And it was very interesting for me because I saw very different sides of different directors, and I've had that opportunity to work with so many different filmmakers, even in the South, and seen how different people work, and it's very fascinating.
yeah. In this entire conversation, you just very easily, calmly sort of mentioned that, hey, we decided to do that movie and got the four directors and the money. I'm sure that was a struggle. Right? And I want to talk more about it. But before we do that, because I'm one of those people who, till this conversation, thought that producers basically mean bring in the money, right? Like that's the perception, that's the common perception. Tell us a little bit about what does production really entail? Like, what does that mean to produce a movie?
So, of course, a lot of producers do put in their own monies and produce themselves. But where people like us come from, where I come from, it starts with a seed, with an idea. And once I sometimes it's an idea that I have, and then I get a writer to develop that idea for me. Sometimes it's a writer who comes to me with a script and I'm in love with, and that's what I want to produce. So first, it starts with what you want to make, whether it's your idea, it's an idea that you've read, or it's a script that you've developed over 1 or 2 years. So once you've got that idea and that plan of what you want to make, that's when the producer's process begins. It's from that point to trying to set up the project, with whether it's raising finance to be able to make that film. Raising finances via different studios, via different producers who put in the money. That's one step. The other step is casting, putting the film together, and making sure that the financial viability and the creative, um, the script are in sync with each other. For example, I can't be making a really the math has to work for the person putting in the money. So if I'm making a film which has certain which has actors of a value, in the sense what value can I attain from a studio for that. So making sure that's in sync, getting actors, getting the studio who's going to put in the money, and then putting your entire team together, of course, with your technicians, with how it's going to flow, all of that together. So a producer's job starts from the idea, the script, to raising finance, to to the director, to the technicians, to everybody, making the whole project happen in a certain budget. And then once it goes into the marketing space, being part of that too. So it starts and ends from through and through the producers on the job, making it all happen, and getting all the different people from different departments together. That's what a producers primarily, that's what they do worldwide, and even in India that's what they do. But back in the day, the producers were people who would just put in the money and everybody else would just do
Clean
everything
it up.
else.
Yeah.
And now the producers are putting the entire project together, sometimes putting in their own money, and the other times raising money from different studios, different platforms, etc. Yeah.
And from a financial sort of angle, right, there's obviously pitching the idea to get somebody to back it, either a studio or a production house. Do you then heavily get involved in the overall sort of profitability by negotiating rights for OTT or music and a bunch of other things?
So every project varies. It's obviously all negotiation on it. Every project is different. So sometimes, yes, producers completely involved in all the rights, in all the, sometimes an actor is also the producer on the project. So actors' rights, all of that. So like I said, every project is different. Like every child is different, every
Right.
project is different, and every project has their own, um, you know, has its own journey. Sometimes it's theatrical now, sometimes it's only OTT, sometimes it's OTT and theatrical, and you're figuring out the math through it all. Sometimes you're trying to make it in different languages. So it's all you have to play it, differently with each project.
Got it. And one last question on the finances of it. Generally, producers who don't put in money, are they sort of the compensation for them? Is it the end result of how everything comes out and what the net number is, and therefore the producers make it, or is there a fixed fee plus that? How does that math work?
Again, like I said, it's different. Sometimes it's a fixed fee plus that. Sometimes you do not take a fee and you go all head in with the other studio, and then you are part of the profits later. So it's different. It's also depending on the risk factor of the project that you're doing. So every time you do a project, you will be able to assess it with the market, with the studios that you're talking to, where and what can be figured out on this project.
Got it. Interesting. Now let's
Yes.
come back to Lush Stories. How did that happen, right? Because you're still somebody who's had experience at DFD, but you don't have something from a production perspective to show that, hey, I've done XYZ and that's therefore I can pull in these four directors. You pulled in four big names in your first go. So I want to learn more about how did that happen.
We started with Bombay Talkies, which at that time world premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, was a big deal for me. When Anurag came on board, I was very clear that I wanted four very different filmmakers. So, I mean, because Anurag makes certain kind of cinema and other people make different kind of cinema. So I was very clear that we have to have like it's like a buffet. Like everybody has to, like, because not everybody will be a fan of this or that. So people should be able to come and watch an anthology with different um, ideas, like the same concept, but different ways of showing it through different filmmakers' point of view. So so that's when Zoya happened, and I was very keen on getting someone who's known for their commercial sensibilities and really going large with everything. And I was very, very interested in wanting to get Karan, and I was, everybody around me told me that, Karan's never going to do this, like why would he do something like this? So I was like, okay, what's the worst that's going to happen? He's going to just say a no. So I got his number from someone and I sent him a really long message, telling him what we want to do, and we want to celebrate 100 years of cinema. And at that time, he was shooting for Student of the Year, and he was very gracious. Karan is a very, very gracious person. He just responded back saying, I'm shooting. Do you think you all can wait for me to come back and talk? And in that moment, I was like, absolutely, yes, we're going to wait for as long as it takes. Then Karan came back, and then I met him, and we pitched this idea to him. And he said, there's this story that I want to do. Um, and if you guys let me make that story, I'm very happy to do this. And we were like, yes. And he told us about the story, and then that's how Karan happened. So I mean, I'm telling you, it didn't happen so quickly. It was like
Of course,
a whole journey,
yeah.
and it took a couple of years to put all of this together. But yeah, so Anurag happened, Dibakar happened, Zoya, Karan, in that sequence. And then we had our film, and we were very excited that we've got four different directors, and their chemistry between all four of them was also really great because they were all friends. And that's how Bombay Talkies happened. And post Bombay Talkies, we got a lot of love for it. We were like, okay, let's do something else, and that's how the idea of Lust Stories came together. And then they made Lust Stories, and Ronnie Screwwala produced it with me, um, Lust Stories. And at that time, Netflix was coming into India, and it was one of the second or third Netflix originals out of India.
That's fascinating. And as you can sort of, as you mentioned earlier, every project needs to be thought through independently, right? Like you just need to forget about everything that has happened in the past and then just have a clean slate for this new project and figure out everything from scratch again.
Like, and you can see that from everybody else's filmography as well, that every time you do a project, it really depends on what you are trying to say. If it's like, I don't like to use these words, but just to explain it better to people listening, whether it's when it's a mainstream film where you need larger budgets, bigger actors, bigger scale, all of that, to when it's a smaller film where you don't need all of that, the math of those two films will be very, very different. And hence the box office expectations or the OTT expectation, all of that will be very different. So you have to weigh in every project very differently. You can't make a film which you're not going to be able to get those kind of numbers for a certain, so you can't spend 100 rupees on something where the potential is only about 30 rupees to
Right.
make. So you have to weigh every time there is a script and then you put together the project. You have to weigh how this is going to pan out in a slightly safer way. You never know what's going to happen with films. That's a gamble, right? But at least on paper you will know the math of how it should look. If it involves a really big actor, it's going to cost you that much. Hence you need to make an X amount to be able to recover that. So similarly on a smaller film is different. So every project you have to weigh in the numbers, then work out the math and see how it's going to work better for the studio or people putting in the money, so that chances are that you don't incur losses or try and avoid those losses. So yeah.
Got it. I have a twofold question here. In if that's the case, then does the industry have producers who sort of niche and focus on one kind of thing because they know how to make that work? And also, like a follow up question to that is, what makes a good producer? Like, what makes you good at your job when you're producing?
So firstly, I'd like to say, um, it's the most producing is actually a thankless job. So when a film does really well, the actors and the directors take all the credit. When the films don't do well, the producer has to take a lot of flack for it. So producing is a very thankless job, and it's not for the faint-hearted, because every day there is a new problem. Literally every day there is a new problem, and there are in the process of making a film, forget about when you've made it, in the process of making a film, there are such serious ups and downs that you go through, that many times through the process you feel like giving up and just being like, I can't do
Tell
this.
me an example of what that would look like on a day-to-day
Like,
basis.
just to give you an example, sometimes you know you've got an actor, you've put together everything, you've raised the finance, and somehow the actor backs out.
Hmm.
Just just when you're all ready to go, the actor backs out. Or a script somebody else announces, or you see a trailer of a film that very similar to your script, which has nothing to do with, two people can think of two similar things sometimes. Or sometimes the studio suddenly decides, listen, we committed this budget to you, but right now we can't pay you this because the market is going through whatever. So all sorts of problems. These are bigger problems. Then on a daily basis, smaller problems happen. Like during COVID, we were trying to shoot where you're on set, somebody will, two people fall sick, and those two people are your key people, like your DOP who's shooting your film. Everybody has to be parked aside. So every day you wake up, when you're in the process of making a film, there is going to be a problem. And I mean, in the beginning, it used to bother me a lot and I used to get really worked up. But now I've just been like, okay, so how do we resolve it? How do we move on from it? Because there are going to be problems. That's the whole nature of this business.
and
And
and as a producer, you become the final point of contact for all problems, right? Like the smallest problems and the biggest problems eventually come to you saying that, hey,
if
here's the problem,
somebody's
figure out
falling
how.
sick, to not not having enough monies to shoot, or to the actor backing out, or to anything, it's all on the producer. So yeah, like you literally, and like I said, eventually when the film gets made, it's a thankless job.
Right.
It's gratifying to you, like when I see the final result, I'm like, wow. I mean, I remember how we started and where we are at, so it's very gratifying. And but overall, we always joke about it on set that, okay, when you leave the set, a lot of people may not like the producer by the end of it, and it's okay, because producer's job is to make sure that everything happens in a certain way. And sometimes it doesn't go well with certain people, and that's what you have to manage relationships really well. You have to, it's like planning a wedding, right?
Yeah.
So you can plan the best wedding, but someone will always leave, one guest will leave saying khana acha nahi tha, or like acha room nahi tha, ya acha something nahi tha. So it's always going to happen. It all boils down to the producer. So very used to it, very trying to like, it would earlier bother me, but as a producer, what you really try to do is make sure your set, your crew is happy, comfortable, being fed well, being taken care of, because they're all also working so hard. And especially the technicians and the labor work so hard for so many days. So you try to make sure that they are happy and comfortable. And if they do have a problem, they must come to you and talk to you. Sometimes you're able to help them, sometimes you're not able to help them, but at least you try every day.
Yeah. And in a way, producer is the only one who's there throughout the journey, because there are a bunch of other people who get involved, but they focus on that particular job and get done and then sort of move on. Right.
So you're there in the project, producer and the director are there through and through. So yeah.
Interesting. Now, coming back to the first question, is the industry then segregated in a way where um, producers figure out that this is my niche and this is my core skill set and these are the kind of movies that I'm good at? Or is the industry full of people who can do, different kinds of projects in terms of commercial values and the just the type of projects?
you know Everybody aspires to be able to make all kinds of films, right? You are chasing good stories. Now sometimes those stories may involve trying to get a Shah Rukh Khan and a 300 crore budget, and sometimes those stories are smaller stories, but we all aspire to be able to make the kind of stories we want to tell. Of course, at the start of your career, and for me even now, and maybe it'll take me many few more years to be able to make the other films that I want to make, which need the bigger budgets, which need the bigger stars. And I am working towards it. I am trying my best to be able to have a story so compelling that I can take to a star, or to a studio that I'm able to navigate and people want to work with me. But it takes time. It's a process, because even your studios and your actors trust certain directors and certain producers to be able to pull that off. So of course it is a journey, like anything else in life, that you're not going to start and get to make a film with Shah Rukh Khan. You know, you it's baby steps. You and because we all aspire to be able to do that someday, and that's what you start with. So nobody comes to the industry and says, "मैं तो सिर्फ छोटी फिल्में ही बनाऊंगा या
Hmm.
मैं तो सिर्फ यही करूंगा." You want to be able to, you know, be able to make what you want to
Big.
make.
Yeah.
You know, you want to read a story and have that liberty to be like, wow, this story, this needs this actor who may be a huge star, but I want that actor and I want to try and get that actor. So
Hmm.
that's what we all aspire for. It takes time, but baby steps, we get
Makes
there.
sense. Makes sense. And you've been at it. It's been 18 years since you moved to Bombay, and
Just it just hit me.
yeah,
18 years. Has it? 18
2005. You said, right?
years. Oh God.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I'm gonna throw a curveball because you've seen that journey of Bollywood so closely and the kind of movies that are made, and how the industry has progressed. Tell me, what do you think, if there's any significant change that happens in the next decade or so? Do you see a trend that's going to catch on and that's going to become a thing? Because there are conversations about, theatrical releases. Earlier we only had theatrical releases versus so many more movies now come on OTT. Where do you see this happen? Where do you see this going?
It's, at least in our industry, it's very tough to say what the trend is going to be, what's going to happen. But one thing, like, 2 years ago, like, not forget 2 years ago, till 8 months ago, everyone was like, oh, nobody wants to watch Hindi movies in the theaters, this, that, and the other. And then Pathan came, and now Gadar came. Like, I was coming back from Bareilly, and I saw this theater, like a single screen theater, and in Bareilly, where there were people. That's the weekend Gadar released. Yeah, that's the weekend that there were, it actually felt like a political rally. There was
Wow.
hordes of people trying to get into the theater. So I'm saying, till 9 months ago or 8 months ago, everybody was like, nobody wants to see Hindi films. Before that, everybody only wants to see OTT. Then came a phase people only want to see the South films. Now people are going back to theaters to watch Sunny Deol, to
Yeah.
watch a film which was released 27 years ago. So, and which has beaten all records right now. So you don't know the trend. Nobody knows anything. The only thing that I know people, which shouldn't change and I don't think will change, is people eventually, at least in India, want to get entertained worldwide.
Yeah.
People want to go to theater and just get entertained.
Yeah.
So I think theatrically, those kind of films will always work because there are very few ways of entertainment in our country. Like, it's not like we have concerts and parks. Like, so for a middle class family, or for just people like us, all of us, what is your entertainment on the weekend? You want to go to the theater, you want to watch a movie, and you want to get entertained, and you want to come home.
Yeah.
So as long as that is there, which should be there, people will watch movies in the theater, and movies will work. A movie that is for the theater audience will work. And of course, parallelly, there will be another world of OTT that will exist, and you will have that comfort of your home to watch the shows and the movies that you want to watch, which will be there. So I think both of them will always coexist now, like television, OTT, theater, and there will be different kind of films and different kind of shows everywhere, but they will all coexist because we are such a large population. I
Yeah.
mean, there's something for everyone.
I 100% agree. This is also a realization that I had when, about the entertainment bit. I used to live in the US and I realized that I didn't watch as many movies in the US unless it was like a Marvel coming out or something like that, right? Because the options for entertainment, you could go on a hike, you could do something, you could take a long drive somewhere. Versus when you come to India, you've gone through traffic, 7 days a week. You're back, you're doing the same thing over and over again.
Small towns. I'm from a small town, and you ask people to up weekend पे what do you guys do? So
Movie.
it's very, people are like, mall जाते हैं, picture देखने जाते हैं.
Yeah.
That's it. That is what they
That's
do, right?
yeah.
There is no culture of partying and this and that and constant. That the culture doesn't exist. Like in the big cities, at least those options are there.
Right.
In the middle India and smaller towns, which is the maximum population of
80%.
our country,
Exactly.
um, people, that is their form of entertainment. Even in Bombay, everybody, like on the weekend, like you ask your people in the office, your colleagues, everyone, what are you doing? Okay, what movie is on? I'm going to go watch a movie. So movies are the primary entertainment in our country. And then there is IPL, and then there's cricket and all of that, of course. But people like to watch stuff. So as long as there is
Yeah.
that, people will definitely go and watch movies
Yeah.
at home, or they'll watch it at home, or they'll go to the theater.
Yeah, and this whole debate about OTT and theater releases, I think, is overblown also, because all that's going to happen is different kinds of content is going to go to different platforms.
Right.
OTT gives you that liberty to create like long form 10-hour content.
Like,
Um,
I made a film called Kala Kandi with Saif
yeah,
Ali Khan, and at that time, and that this is one of the, I've never spoken about it. This is one of the big regrets of my career, that at that time Netflix wanted it to be an OTT original film, and it was going to be one of their first films, actually their first film in India. And they had made us an offer, and we were really excited about it. And somehow, I don't know, we took a collective decision of, because at that time we were still on the edge about OTT
OTT,
and
yeah,
theater, and we chose to release that movie in the theater, and it didn't do as well. So, and now I know that if that movie at that point had released on OTT, the audience for that movie was there, it existed, and it would have done well. But you made a wrong call, and you live and learn, and it's fine. But sometimes you are aware that this movie will fly better on OTT as opposed to the theaters. I mean, having said that, there are no guaranteed, there are chances, like Shersha released on Amazon
yeah,
on OTT, but I'm quite certain if it released in the theater, it would have still done really well. So sometimes you you take calls on different projects, and they don't work out for you. But in hindsight, you realize, you know what, I made a mistake. I regret that decision. I wish I'd done it differently, because the audience for that film existed on OTT.
yeah. And as a producer, I think you also have to learn that art of like just moving on, like just taking it into your stride and moving on. Because if you get too hung up on one of those decisions, it can affect everything else that comes.
But that's like life, right?
Yeah.
Like anything that happens to you, you have to somehow move on, try and move on from it, because otherwise you're just going to be in that loop forever. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I want to switch gears and take you back to, your early days. I know 2005 is when you came to Bombay. 2009 is when Devdi happened. 12, 13 is when Bombay Talkies happened. When was
Bombay Talkies released in 2013.
13, right? So it was 8, 9 years of you, finding your feet
So
in Bombay.
2005, when I moved to Bombay, I studied for a year. So
Right.
2006 is when I started working. And from 2006 to 2009, when I started my company, I was not doing movies. I was creating advertising funded programming for television. So I did a show called Director's Cut on Zoom. I did
Mm.
a concert called Wave for Sony Entertainment. So I did multiple things for those 3 years on television. And then I jumped to movies after that, which was,
So that's exactly the point that I was trying to get to is how does somebody new who has aspirations to be in Bollywood, keeping aside the actors and the people who want to make it there, because that's a different ball game altogether, I'm assuming. But for somebody who wants to be in the industry as somebody who's technical or a producer, how do you break into the industry without having those connects? What
uh,
advice would you give them? Somebody coming in now.
I would tell them to start with, I mean, if you want to be in the technical field, like an editing, DOP, graphics, animation, all of that, of course, learn that skill, educate yourself, go to a college, go to some place and educate yourself. But if you want to direct, produce, direction, also, there are so many courses available. But also, for me, most of the experience was on the job. So start with interning, try and get a job somewhere, even if it's at a lower position. Start from somewhere, because only when you're on ground, and sometimes when you get on it, is when you realize, you know what, this is not for me.
Mm,
I don't want to do this. Or maybe when you try to become a director, you realize maybe you're better at production, or maybe you're better at something else, or you're good at costumes, or I don't know. So sometimes just being on the job helps. So get a job, try and intern, try and work on as many jobs as you can to be able to get that experience and understand how things really work. And then eventually you will find your way in the industry. If you're good at it, you will find your way.
right. And the importance of patience, I'm assuming, right? Because it takes,
Yeah.
yeah.
takes it takes it's a saga, let's just say. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. You've also started something else which is slightly different, slightly different from what you do, the Dhoom Dhaam company. I'd love to know more about that, and how do you balance the two things out?
I actually balance multiple things out. Primarily, I have two really small kids, so
How
doing
old are
that
they?
is the major part of my life.
How old are
It
they?
it's My younger one is 20 months old,
Oh
and
wow.
my older one is 5 years old. So in fact, my older one was born 10 days after Love Stories one released. So it's been crazy.
I have a 20-month old. I have a 20-month old, and
Oh, congratulations.
just one of them is like making me rethink about like work and like parenting and like so much more that's happening. I don't know how you do it.
2 years of COVID happened when my older one was still 1.5, 2 years. So that gave me a lot of time with him.
Hmm.
But you manage, yeah, somehow you feel like I was reading one of Rihanna's interview yesterday, and she just had a second child, and she said that somehow when you become a mother, at least, um, it it gives you this great power to think in your head that you can do everything. Like you can work, you can manage house, life, family, everything. Somehow, of course, you have your meltdowns and you have moments where you want to just give up on your work, and I've had many. And I've been like, okay, now I'm going to take it slow, I'm not going to do all of this. But when you're so passionate about your work, and you're equally passionate, I mean, you're madly in love with your children, you somehow manage both. You
Hmm.
somehow do. And I'm not saying I do a great job. I try every day. And there are good days, bad days, but you try every day.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
yeah, you got to
Yeah,
pay the bills. So
I agree exactly.
you have to work.
And it's expensive to now raise kids. I
When
don't know if
kids are expensive in Bombay, kids are expensive. Kids
exactly.
everywhere in the world are expensive, and when the kids will grow up, they will realize that they'll be proud of you. So
Yeah, for
you
sure.
gotta work. Yeah.
So the Dhoom Dham company, tell me a little bit more about what you do
So
there.
Dhoom company I started with one of my closest friends who's a stylist in the industry, very very known, very good stylist in the industry called Tanya Ghavri. I co-founded it with her, and the idea about Dhoom Dham was we wanted to start and do something fun together. So I take care of the business side of it. She takes care of the fashion side of it. So what we do is we curate about 5 to 6 shows in a year during festive period, and we travel with it in different cities where we get about 50, 60 designers in every city, which she curates, talented from different parts of the country to come under one roof and exhibit their stuff. And last year we went international with it. We did it in Dubai too, and we plan to grow it further from here. Yeah.
That is fascinating. Ashi, I don't know how you do all of this. This because just producing one of those movies is two full-time jobs, right? So doing
Oh,
everything
I
else that
did
you
anthologies, so it was 4 full-time jobs. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Perfect. Thank you so much, Ashi. This was a fascinating conversation. Thank you
Likewise,
so
thank
much
you so
for
much.
sharing your journey so candidly. And I think it's going to inspire a lot of people.
I hope so. And I'd just like to say that, like I heard a lot of, and actually Priyanka is a great, because Priyanka Chopra is also from Bareilly. And I remember seeing her become Miss Bareilly when I was a little girl there. And then to see her become Miss World. And now when you go to New York, you see her hoardings all over. It's so much pride. I just want to say that there is no such thing as small town girl or a small town boy it doesn't matter where you come from. You just need to know what you want to do, and you need to go after it. That's
Yeah.
all.
And
It
I think
doesn't matter which
just the
town
only
you
thing that I'm going to add, which I personally am inspired by, is just the patience, right? Because as I said, 18 years in the industry and everything comes step by step. You can't be in a rush to get it all and then get frustrated that I'm not getting it.
Yeah.
Just taking those baby steps to get to where you
Making
want.
movies is your first big step. Like you have a child. The children teach you patience.
Yeah.
Making movies teach you patience in 200, because
Mm.
it's such a long process, and but a gratifying one, like I said.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm sure it's going to be very inspiring. And as people who are not from the Bollywood industry, it often comes across as it's very hard to crack in. And it might be for the front line roles like actors, but there is a method to the madness when it comes to all the technical roles and the production and stuff like that. So thank you so much for sharing that journey.
My pleasure. It's been fun. Thank you.